Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Blog Podcast. Today is Wednesday, December 26, 2018. Hope you all had a wonderful Christmas. I'm going to start with the NBA Christmas games, and I'll go over tonight's slate. Go over yesterday's college hoops games. There's no college hoops games today. We'll just go over the ones from last night. There weren't many of them. It was the championship and consolation games of the Christmas tournaments that were going on in Hawaii and in Vegas. Week 17 NFL guest aligned. I'm going to do the 2018 NFL ReDraft. Do picks for the bowl games being played today and my best bet of the day. So it's probably going to be a quick podcast today. To the NBA Christmas slate we go. The Bucks defeat the Knicks 109-95. Giannis Antetokounmpo was the star of this one as the Bucks improved to 23-10. New York drops to 9-26. I mentioned Giannis, 30 points, 14 rebounds. Brook Lopez had 20. Eric Bledsoe had 11 with 6 boards and 5 assists. Malcolm Brogdon had 17 with 6 boards. Off the bench, Thon Maker had 12. Meanwhile, for New York, Kevin Knox had 21 points and 6 boards. He's an improving player for them. And by the way, all the Knicks starters, even in a double-digit loss, all scored in double digits as their bench didn't do anything. Noah Vonleh had 14 points and 15 boards. Tim Hardaway Jr. had 14 points and 10 boards. Emmanuel Mudiay had 11. Enes Kanter had 12. Second game, the Rockets defeat the Thunder 113-109. This was a fun game. Oklahoma City led much of the game. Houston took over in the fourth quarter. James Harden was the best player on the court in this game. Houston's 18-15. Oklahoma City drops to 21-12. Harden, 41 points, 6 boards, 7 assists. Eric Gordon had 17 points and 6 boards. Clint Capella, 16 points and, wait for it, 23 rebounds. And PJ Tucker had 11 with 7 boards. Off the bench, Austin Rivers hit a couple big three-pointers there. In the fourth quarter, he had 10 points. Meanwhile, for OKC, Paul George, 28 points and 14 rebounds. Russell Westbrook, 21 points, 9 boards, 9 assists. Steven Adams, 17-7. Jeremy Grant, 15-9. Off the bench, Dennis Schroeder had 10 with 6 assists. The Celtics defeated the 76ers 121-114 in overtime, which turned out, in my opinion, to be the best game of the day. Boston goes to 20-13. Philadelphia drops to 22-13. Kyrie Irving was excellent in this game. So many big shots in the fourth quarter. 40 points and 10 boards. Marcus Morris and Jason Tatum each had 23. Terry Rozier had 10 off the bench. Joel Embiid was phenomenal too. 34 points and 16 boards. Jimmy Butler had 24. He hit some big shots for Philly. Ben Simmons had 11 points, 14 boards, and 8 assists. J.J. Redick had 17. Wilson Chandler had 15. Bench didn't do anything. And what, in my opinion, was the most surprising result of the day, the Lakers defeated the Warriors 127-101 in Oracle Arena. There were so many Laker fans at this game. It was shocking. It felt like the Lakers had more fans there than Golden State. And that really hasn't been the case where the opposing fans showed up like that in Oracle Arena since Steve Kerr's been the coach there. But the big story of this game is that LeBron James was injured in the third quarter. Strained left groin. He's going to be out for at least a week. That's a big loss for the Lakers, but it was better than what it looked to be. So that's good news for LA. And depending on what LA's schedule is, I think they can manage it, especially if they get weaker teams at home, like somebody like the Suns or one of those bad Eastern Conference teams like the Knicks or the Bulls or Atlanta. With that said, the Lakers improved to 20-14. Golden State drops to 23-12. Kyle Kuzma led the Lakers in scoring with 19. LeBron had 17-13. Brandon Ingram had 14. Ivica Zubac, who's been starting at center for the Lakers over the past few games because JaVale McGee's hurt, 18 points, 11 boards. And in the bench, Rajon Rondo, 15 points and 10 assists. So he's going to be a big asset for them in big games, and I wouldn't be surprised down the road if they start him in some games and have Ball come off the bench. But if I'm the Lakers, I would not do that because I think Ball is better suited to be a starter, and Rajon Rondo is better off coming off the bench. But he provided some big minutes for the Lakers, and he's somebody that I think will prove to be an essential pickup for LeBron's team because he's been in big games before. He's thrived in big games. Yeah, it didn't work out for him in Dallas after Boston traded him. He was in Sacramento for a year. It didn't work out for him that year either. But sometimes it takes a while for players to come back from a torn ACL. And when he was on the Bulls, he actually had some big games for them and helped them make the playoffs that year. And then he was on New Orleans last year and helped them get to the second round. Now he's on the Lakers, helping out LeBron James and his new team. All right, yeah, Lakers believe that LeBron James will miss at least a few games after injuring his groin in Christmas Day win over the Warriors, courtesy of Yahoo's Chris Haynes. Lance Stevens hit in a couple big three-pointers in this game as well. He had 11, and Josh Hart off the bench had 12. Meanwhile, for Golden State, Draymond Green only had 4 with 5 assists and 5 boards, and he fouled out. He just hasn't been good this year, Draymond Green. I don't know if he's not a good basketball player anymore or something's not right or what's going on with him. He lost his ability to shoot, and this wasn't the case just this year. This started even last year, and the Warriors just got away from it, or got away with it, I should say. That speaks to the brilliance of Kevin Durant and Stephen Curry. Durant had 21, 7, and 7. Kevin Looney, starting at center, had 10. Stephen Curry had only 15, so it wasn't a strong game for him. Though he had a couple big three-pointers in the third quarter to make that game interesting after LeBron got hurt and then the Laker bench stepped up. And speaking of off the bench, Andre Iguodala off the bench for Golden State had 23, and he looked like the Andre Iguodala of old in that game. So that was a positive takeaway from Golden State, if you're looking for one. The Jazz feed the Trailblazers 117-96. Great win for Utah. They're starting to get on a bit of a roll here. They're 17-18. Portland's 19-15. Donovan Mitchell, 19 points. Ricky Rubio had 14. Rudy Gobert had 18 with 14 boards. Joe Ingles had 15.7 boards and 5 assists. Off the bench, Jay Crowder had 12. Dante Exum had 15. And Kyle Korver had 10. So the Jazz bench, with the addition of Korver, now is all of a starting to look formidable. Damian Lillard had 20. C.J. McCollum only had 11. Al-Farouq Aminu only had 11. Zach Collins off the bench had 10, but he was mostly playing in garbage time. Evan Turner had 12 off the bench. Today's slate is pretty big, considering that a lot of teams didn't play on Christmas. Some teams that played yesterday are on the second of back-to-backs. 7 o'clock, you have the Wizards and the Pistons. The Suns at the Magic. The Pacers at the Hawks. The Hornets at the Nets at 7:30. NBA TV, Raptors at the Heat. 8 o'clock, the Timberwolves at the Bulls. So, storyline there, Derrick Rose, Tom Thibodeau, and Taj Gibson back in Chicago. And so I expect that to be emotional for them, especially Rose. Wouldn't be shocked if Rose had a pretty good performance, and then the Bulls fans are going to give him a standing ovation because his career really could have gone differently if he didn't tear his ACL in the 2012 playoffs, and maybe LeBron James has maybe 1 ring rather than 3, or maybe he has 0 rings for that matter, because you never know. That guy was on his way to being a multi-MVP winner, multi-time All-Star. He was the best point guard in the NBA at the time he won the MVP, along there with Chris Paul and at the time Rajon Rondo, and at the time even Deron Williams. But it's just so tragic, and he was just never the same. And then Chicago traded him to the Knicks. He did not have a good year with the Knicks, although he averaged in double figures with points. And it was just a messy Knicks season. Phil Jackson, just a lot of turmoil. And then Rose escaped the Knicks, and that was a big story in New York. And then in free agency, he wound up going to the Timberwolves, and he's been playing pretty well since he joined Tom Thibodeau, or I should say reunited with Tom Thibodeau. But he's certainly not the guy that we thought he was going to be when he was an MVP candidate with the Bulls. Cavaliers at the Grizzlies, 8:30 at the Pelicans at the Mavericks, the Nuggets at the Spurs, and at 10:30 at the Kings at the Clippers. So, now that I think about it, none of these teams played yesterday. I thought some of these teams were playing. I thought the Lakers were playing the Kings today, but it just so happens that the Clippers are playing the Kings. So, I got the LA teams there mixed up. And I thought the Clippers were snubbed on Christmas because usually both LA teams play. The Bulls had no business being on Christmas. They have no stars. And that team's just god-awful. You could argue that the Knicks don't belong on Christmas, especially this year without Porzingis. But in the league's defense, I think they thought Porzingis would have been back by now. But it's obvious that the Knicks are letting him take his time because they're rebuilding. And to be quite frank, the Knicks are doing the right thing by letting him take his time. And there's the cases for and against him coming back this year. The case for it is you want to know how healthy he is, and the case against it is trying to risk another injury or a setback. And if he were to be healthy per se, it would hurt their chances of getting a top 3 pick in the draft. Everybody wants Zion Williamson. He's the most NBA hyped prospect since LeBron James in 2003. Andrew Wiggins in 2014 was pretty hyped. And then he had a disappointing year at Kansas. And then he wound up being the number 1 overall pick anyway. And he was the number 1 overall pick in 2014 because Joel Embiid got hurt. Which you can make a case cost Kansas a chance to win a national championship. But boy, a lot of what-ifs in the NBA over the past 10 years. We've discussed Derrick Rose and how much that changes LeBron James's career, perhaps, because the year LeBron won his first championship was the year Derrick Rose tore his ACL. And we're talking about with Joel Embiid, if he stayed healthy in college, he would have been number 1 in the Cavs, and Andrew Wiggins would have been on on Philadelphia. Or you can make a case Embiid would have been on Minnesota because maybe they still do the Kevin Love trade. But, boy, a lot of big what-ifs, and LeBron James even, because Cleveland gets number 1 pick, and LeBron ends up going back there. They trade Wiggins in the deal for Kevin Love, and that could have been Embiid going back to Minnesota rather than Wiggins if Embiid was healthy in college. But it turns out Embiid is the best player from that draft, and it might not be close. And from here on in, he's going to be a perennial MVP candidate, leading the Sixers to big things from now until the foreseeable future. We'll talk about a lot of what-ifs and stuff another day on the podcast. Let's move on to college basketball. Only a few games were on yesterday. And like I said, it was championship games and consolation games in the Diamond Head Classic. Oh, and the Vegas thing is over. I didn't know that. I thought that the Vegas tournament was being held too, but it was just the Diamond Head. Colorado defeats Charlotte 68-53 as Colorado goes to 9-3. Charlotte drops to 3-8. Hawaii defeats Rhode Island 68-60. Hawaii goes to 8-5. Rhode Island drops to 6-5. Bucknell defeats UNLV 97-72. Bucknell is 6-6. UNLV is also 6-6. So that's a bit of surprising. And TCU defeats Indiana State 83-69 as TCU wins the tournament. They're 11-1. Indiana State's 8-4. And TCU is looking like perhaps the second best team in the Big 12. And certainly near lock to go to the tournament at this point, barring a rough Big 12 conference play. But they've had a really fine start to their season. And we're going to do college basketball evaluations on either Sunday's podcast or Monday's podcast as conference schedules start to emerge from pretty much every league. I know the Big Ten started a little early this year. Some conferences start on Saturday. Some of them start next Saturday. So we're going to do evaluations on the podcast next week because after Guess the Lines, I'm going to do the 2018 NFL redraft. I'm going to do the NBA redraft from 2018 tomorrow. And I'll probably do another one for the NBA in the summertime after the season's over. But I'll do one after the 3-month mark, just at the end of the calendar year. And then I'm going to do one for baseball on Friday's podcast. And I'll do hockey's on Saturday. I'll start the college basketball evaluations on Sunday. And in Monday's podcast, it's going to be full-blown predictions for 2019. And maybe I'll do some more college basketball evaluations if I don't have enough time on Sunday. So that's the heads up for the schedule on the podcast for the next couple days. And now I'm going to get to guess the lines for Week 17. This was the hardest week to pick. Week 1's always hard and Week 17's always hard. You could argue Week 17 is harder because a lot of teams are sitting their starters and a lot of teams have some injuries that they're dealing with right now. And there's some unknowns, too, with whether teams are sitting guys or not. The first game on the board for Sunday is the Dolphins at the Bills. I have the Bills as a 3.5-point favorite. And the Bills are laying 3.5. So one pick. One correct pick. The Lions at the Packers. I have the Packers laying 7 against the Lions. And Green Bay is laying 8. It actually opened at some sports books at 7. But 1 point off, it's 8. Oh, we have breaking college news that I'm going to get to in a moment. But I'm going to keep going with Guess the Lines. The Patriots are hosting the Jets. I have the Pats minus 10.5. And New England is laying a whopping 13.5. That is very, 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 very high. The Panthers at the Saints. I actually have the Panthers as a favorite by 3.5. But no, New Orleans is laying 8.5. So New Orleans is indeed playing their starters. And hey, sometimes it's the best thing to do to play your starters because sometimes the week off hurts you. I remember Mike Tomlin did it in 2014 after he had the division crown in a 2 seed. Or I'm sorry, it was a 3 or 4 seed because they lost in the wild card round, locked up. And Baltimore went in there and beat him outright. And Pittsburgh was only a 3-point favorite in that game. And it seemed low. Everybody was like, oh, Pittsburgh. Like, why are they that low of a favorite? And then Baltimore goes out there and wins outright and nearly ends up beating New England outright. And New England came from behind and won against Baltimore in the division round that year. So sometimes you're better off playing your starters. But the case against playing your starters is just because you don't want to risk injury. So again, there's always two sides of an argument, and the Saints are going with the argument of we don't want to be the Steelers from a few years ago where you rest your starters and then you go out and you look flat. But it's sometimes different when you have a bye in the first round. I remember Indianapolis always played their starters after wrapping up a bye in home field advantage when Peyton Manning was their quarterback. And then one year it ended up working out. They won the Super Bowl. And then the other year, they went to the Super Bowl, but they ended up losing. And then another time they played everybody, and then they wound up losing in the wild card round to the Jets. But sometimes it works out and other times it doesn't. But the Saints are -8.5. Maybe they play their starters until it's a blowout, and then they play Taysom Hill at quarterback or Lamar Jackson. Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. I confused Jackson and Bridgewater there because they're both Louisville quarterbacks. But yeah, Bridgewater. And then they sit Kamara, they sit Thomas, and they give the keychains to Bridgewater to try to earn himself a little paycheck from a team that wants a quarterback next year. The Cowboys at the Giants. I have the Giants as a 3.5-point favorite over the Dallas Cowboys, and New York is laying 6. So Dallas is indeed sitting their regulars in this one. Cooper Rush might be starting at quarterback for Dallas. So if that's the case, the Giants probably are going to win by double digits. But if Prescott plays, maybe they play him until it's a blowout. But the case of the Giants tanking the game is also in play now for a big reason why I'm about to break some college news on this podcast that I just had found out. But let me just finish guess the lines for a minute here. I have the Falcons as a 4.5-point favorite at the Buccaneers. I was way off on this one. Tampa Bay's laying 1.5. Maybe I overrated the Falcons from the last 2 weeks. Jaguars at the Texans. I have the Texans by 7.5. And Houston is a 7-point favorite. That sounds about right. It was 8. It's down to 7. Maybe Bortles is worth the point, believe it or not. I don't think he's worth anything because I just don't think he's a good NFL quarterback. The Chargers at the Broncos. I have the Los Angeles Chargers as a 4.5-point favorite at Denver. They're laying 6.5. The Chargers need this game in the worst way. If they see that the Chiefs are winning big over Oakland, then I could see them going to Geno Smith and sitting their starters. So maybe picking the Broncos isn't the worst idea in the world if you're a gambler out there. The Raiders at the Chiefs. I have the Chiefs as a 12.5-point choice over the Oakland Raiders. Now we're obviously into the 4 o'clock games, and they're minus 13.5. So I was 1 point off there. And the Chiefs need this game. The pressure's on them. If they win their division and get the number 1 seed in the AFC. I think the best home field advantage in the playoffs was going to be Arrowhead. But it looked a little vulnerable in that Thursday night game as the Chargers were able to come back and beat the Chiefs in that game. But maybe it's Andy Reid, who is never good in a big game. And that is a case for betting against the Chiefs, and obviously because of their defense and that being the liability of their team too. The 49ers at the Rams. I have the Rams laying 8 at home against San Francisco, and they're laying 10. So maybe they think that Todd Gurley will be back for this game. And maybe the Rams are up big and then they sit people. If they win this game, they get a bye in the NFC playoffs. If they lose and the Bears win, that means they drop to the 3 seed. So the Rams are playing for something here, folks. Don't just assume that it's a meaningless game for the Rams, because that loss at the Bears could come back to haunt them if they lose this game and if the Bears beat Minnesota. And speaking of that, that's the next game on the board. I have the Vikings as a 3-point favorite at home over the Chicago Bears. Minnesota's laying 5. I think that's too high. The Vikings haven't beaten anybody good all year, but the pressure's on them, and the Bears, if they see that the Rams are winning big, then they'll sit some of their guys, and the Vikings will end up perhaps winning the game and getting that 6th seed. But the case for the Bears playing their guys, even if the Rams are blowing them out, they don't want their rivals in the playoffs. So you never know, or maybe they'll quote-unquote tank the game and hide some things, because this could very well be a first-round matchup. It would be if the Bears lose this game, and then this is their first-round matchup. So maybe they mask some things and they come away with the win. They as in Minnesota, and then Chicago flourishes everything in their round 1 game. So there's a lot of what ifs to this, and a lot of cases of betting for and against Minnesota. So that's that. Next game on the board is the Bengals at the Steelers. I have the Steelers minus 12.5 at home against the lowly Bengals, and they're minus 14.5. That's high, but no Andy Dalton, and the Bengals are just not a good team without him. And they're not a good team with him either, to be quite frank. The Cardinals at the Seahawks. This was my biggest guess of the week. I have the Seahawks by 16. And Seattle is laying only 13.5, so the Steeler line is bigger. And that's probably because that Seattle has the playoffs wrapped up. But the case here is that if they lose, they can drop to 6. So it's not a guarantee that Minnesota plays the Bears. So, yeah, I didn't even think about that. I laid out that Bears-Vikings scenario assuming Seattle wins. So that's a bad job on my part. The Eagles are at the Redskins, and I have the Eagles as a 6.5-point choice over their division rivals. And they're minus 6.5, so that's the second correct pick I had on the podcast. And then, last but not least, the Browns at the Ravens. I have the Ravens by 6. No, I'm sorry. I have the Ravens by 7, and it's Ravens by 6. So I was 1 point off. And the case here is Ravens, if they win this game, they're in the playoffs. And in the case for the Steelers, Ravens lose to the Browns, and Baker Mayfield goes for Rookie of the Year and leads the Browns to the upset win. Steelers beat the Bengals, and the Steelers get that 4 seed. So that's up for grabs, and don't dismiss the Steelers yet. A lot of people think they're done. It's not a slam dunk that the Ravens are going to beat the Browns. And last but not least, the Colts at the Titans. I don't know if there's a line here yet. It looks like Marcus Mariota is going to play. I had Colts by 6, assuming that was going to be Blaine Gabbert, but I'm going to narrow it down to Colts by 3. And the Colts are favored by 3, so that was another correct pick by me. So 3 correct picks for Week 17 guess the line, so that's not bad. Now I'm going to do the redraft for 18, but some breaking college news I want to get to. Justin Herbert's returning back to Oregon. I think that's the right decision for Herbert. And then if he has a good year next year, then he could declare with Tua Tagovailoa and Jake Fromm and all the other great quarterbacks that are going to be in next year's draft. So that's the case for, say, Jacksonville and the Giants not trying in Week 17 to get who I think is a better quarterback than Justin Herbert, or better prospect right now, and that's Dwayne Haskins. And Kyler Murray's also lurking. If he declares for the draft, then I would put him ahead of Herbert as well. So when I do my first mock draft of the year, which could very well be on Tuesday, on New Year's Day, or on January 2nd, depending on my schedule and how I organize it for next week for the podcast, the first quarterback taken would have been Dwayne Haskins, not Justin Herbert on that list. So the guy that most people thought was the best quarterback in this draft class is going back to school. I don't think it's that big of a deal of the quarterback needy teams, because I just don't think that Herbert is as good as Haskins or Murray right now. So 2018 NFL redraft, this was actually pretty fun doing. I'm probably going to do another redraft in April after the playoffs and what rookies could break out in the playoffs, because I know that happened last year with guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, who I had in my first round of the 2017 NFL redraft, and Alvin Kamara and some other rookies on some playoff teams. And that's going to be the case here in this mock draft, or redraft I should say. A lot of rookies that are on playoff teams crack this list. So number 1, Cleveland Browns. No do-over here. Baker Mayfield. He's been hands down the best rookie quarterback this year. He may lead the Browns to their first quote-unquote winning season in many years if they are able to pull off this upset of the Ravens on Sunday. He probably should be the offensive rookie of the year just because he single-handedly turned the Browns around. Well, not single-handedly, but has had a big say in the Browns' turnaround. But the case against him being rookie of the year is that Hugh Jackson might have cost him it before he was fired. If the Browns won a couple more of those games, then he would be the easy favorite. But if he doesn't win, the blame is going to be on Hugh Jackson. Number 2, New York Giants, Saquon Barkley. No do-over here. Barkley's the best player from this draft class. And to me, he's the favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Although I'm not sure if he should win it because of how Baker Mayfield stood around the Browns. That's nothing against Barkley. And the voters that are anti-Saquon Barkley for Rookie of the Year are going to blame Eli Manning and say that the Giants should have drafted Sam Darnold instead of you, so you shouldn't be the Rookie of the Year. But that shouldn't be Saquon Barkley's fault either. He's been a beast. He's well deserving of his Pro Bowl honor. He's going to be a multi-Pro Bowl contestee. I expect him to be in the next 3 or 4 Pro Bowls, assuming he stays healthy. And he is probably the face of the Giants franchise right now, unless they draft a quarterback in the draft this spring. Number 3, the New York Jets, Sam Darnold. No do-over here either. Despite struggling throughout the season and turning the ball over a lot, these last 2 weeks have been very promising for the Neo-type rookie. And he really has given Jets fans some hope these last 2 weeks. I expect him to have another solid game in New England against the Pats team that could be resting some players with a big lead, perhaps, next week, assuming that they do have a lead and they end up getting that bye in the first round that many people didn't think would happen maybe 2 weeks ago. But Houston tripped up and New England won, and New England's schedule is softened as Houston ran into a hot Philly team, which made New England jump Houston. But the key here is why New England's ahead of Houston is because New England beat them in week 1 head-to-head. And what was a pretty good game, or turned out to be a pretty good game late, as Houston tried to come back in that game. But that was before Houston got going. And New England, to me, seems a little vulnerable in the playoffs. That's why I expect Darnold to have a good game, or not just in the playoffs, but in the regular season as well. Number 4, the Cleveland Browns. Controversial. I'm going to go with Derwin James, who's been the best defensive rookie in the league this year. He's going to win the Defensive Rookie of the Year. He's a big reason why the Chargers defense has been pretty solid this year. And the Chargers have some blue chippers on that defense, such as James and Joey Bosa, Melvin Ingram among them. And this guy's going to be a Pro Bowler for years to come, and he's a Pro Bowler this year, and it's well-deserved. And not that Denzel Ward's been bad, it's just that Derwin James has been better. Number 5, Denver Broncos, Quentin Nelson, the guard from the Colts. He's also a Pro Bowler, and could you imagine the stats Philip Lindsay would have had in his fine rookie season if Nelson was blocking him? Or that's if they had Lindsay, because he could very well be going in this redraft. But could you imagine if Denver picked Quentin Nelson in the first place and then had Lindsay, and how Lindsay would have been, I think, right there with Saquon Barkley for the Rookie of the Year if they had a better offensive line. But Saquon Barkley ran behind a bad offensive line. But the reason why Saquon Barkley found ways to succeed is because he's Saquon Barkley and he's transcendent. And Philip Lindsay is not transcendent. He's very good, but he's no Saquon Barkley. But Quentin Nelson, well-deserved Pro Bowler, and could you just imagine Denver's offense if he was protecting Case Keenum, and how his stats would have been much better with a better offensive line too. Number 6, Indianapolis Colts, Denzel Ward. Ward has had a fine season as well. He's also in the Pro Bowl. The Browns were heavily criticized when they took Ward over Bradley Chubb. That turned out to be a fine decision by the Browns as Ward made the Pro Bowl. I think Derwin James is just a better player than Denzel Ward, but both of these guys have made the Pro Bowl. 4 of the first 6 guys on this list I mentioned are all in the Pro Bowl. Barkley, James, Nelson, and Ward. And there's more guys on this list that are in the Pro Bowl too, or Pro Bowl snubs by my arguments, but Ward's been awesome, and if he was on the Colts, that secondary would have been much better. Number 7, the Buffalo Bills, Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson has been the 3rd best rookie quarterback since he's been the Ravens quarterback. But I'm not overly impressed with him. Or I wasn't impressed, I should say, in the first place. But he's just been very, very good. And been a big reason why the Ravens are on the verge of clinching a division. And the Ewing theory with Joe Flacco seems to be real, especially if they win on Sunday and if Lamar carries them to places that nobody would expect the Ravens to be this year, including myself. I thought the Ravens were a 6-10 team that was going to end up being a big disappointment and would have been distractions about Jackson and whether he should start. But it took a Flacco injury to bring in Jackson, but he's really has shown his worth and won me over a little bit. Number 8 is the Chicago Bears, Bradley Chubb. Bradley Chubb is awesome. He didn't make the Pro Bowl, but he's been pretty awesome on the Broncos this year. But the Bears get themselves a steal here at Chubb as they would plug him into that fine pass rush they have going. Number 9, the San Francisco 49ers, Minkah Fitzpatrick. Could you imagine how better their secondary would have been if Minkah Fitzpatrick was in there? Number 10, the Arizona Cardinals, Josh Allen. Josh Rosen's been the worst rookie quarterback this year as the Cardinals go with Allen in the redraft. Allen has shown some promise. He's really mobile, and we'll see if he develops a little bit of a passing game. Number 11, the Miami Dolphins, Darius Leonard. He's been excellent for the Colts this year and been a big reason why for their defensive improvement. Number 12, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Leighton Vander Esch, who I thought was a Pro Bowl snub. He's right there with Leonard and Derwin James and even Denzel Ward for the Defensive Rookie of the Year. Number 13, the Redskins, Roquan Smith, who's been solid with the Bears so far. He would have helped Washington, and Vander Esch obviously would have helped Tampa Bay. They didn't really need a defensive tackle. They needed help more in the secondary and with their linebacking. Number 14, the New Orleans Saints, Calvin Ridley. Put him with Michael Thomas, and that offense would have been awesome. 15, the Oakland Raiders, Darren Payne. He would have helped replace the void that Khalil Mack left. 16, the Buffalo Bills, Philip Lindsay. Don't forget they traded up for Tremaine Edmonds, but LaShawn McCoy getting older, Lindsay would have been outstanding on the Bills, and him and Josh Allen would have been a nice foundation. 17 is the Los Angeles Chargers, Tremaine Edmonds. I just mentioned him, but as James goes number 4, the Chargers take Edmonds here, who would have been a steal in this spot too. And he's been pretty solid with the Bills, although he has room to grow as a player. Number 18 is the Green Bay Packers, Antonio Callaway, who's been a fine wide receiver for the Browns and Baker Mayfield this year. Would have helped Aaron Rodgers in that offense with Randall Cobb being injury-prone, and would have been a nice third receiver to go with the injury-prone Cobb and Devontae Adams. And would have helped offset the loss of Jordy Nelson, which I don't think got much attention this year at all. 19, the Dallas Cowboys, Courtland Sutton, who's been a fine receiver for the Denver Broncos this year. Would have helped Dak Prescott a lot. Number 20, the Detroit Lions, Sony Michel. Would have been a big addition to that running game. Number 21, the Cincinnati Bengals, Mike McGlinchey. He's been okay as a rookie, but he would have helped Andy Dalton in that offensive line. 22, the Tennessee Titans, Marcus Davenport, who New Orleans trade up to get. Davenport's been good, but just at 21 rookies, I think would have been better fits on this, I folded out this redraft, that Davenport lands at 22 and the Titans get themselves a steal, as Davenport would have joined Darrell Casey in that pass rush. And 23, the New England Patriots, Frank Rangno, he would have helped that Pats offensive line the big way. Isaiah Wynn has not worked out this year. 24, the Carolina Panthers, DJ Moore. So they take Moore in their redraft, as Moore's been pretty good this year as a rookie. 25, the Baltimore Ravens, Nick Chubb. He's been an excellent rookie on the Browns as well. 26, the Atlanta Falcons, Traquan Smith. Would have been a good fit in that offense. I just think Calvin Ridley's a better player than Smith. And Smith's been a big surprise on the Saints this year. 27 is the Seattle Seahawks, Kerryon Johnson. Would have been a fine addition and big help for Russell Wilson. 28, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Jair Alexander, who has been the best defensive back on the Packers this year. Certainly would have helped Pittsburgh. 29, Jacksonville Jaguars, Hayden Hurst. The Jaguars really don't have a good tight end, and Hurst would have been a nice addition, although you could have argued Nick Mullins or Josh Rosen for this spot. Yes, I did just say Nick Mullins. He's shown a lot of promise as he's filled in for Jimmy Garoppolo these past couple weeks. And number 30, the Minnesota Vikings, Billy Price. The offensive line is the clear weakness of that team, and the Vikings know that, and Price would have been a solid addition to help Kirk Cousins. 31, the New England Patriots, Rashaan Evans. They need help defensively, and Rashaan Evans would have been a big help. And 32, Philadelphia Eagles, Colton Miller. Their offensive line is aging. Miller would have been a big help. Quickly, bull picks as the First Responder Bowl's underway with Boise State and Boston College. Boise State, 10-3 on the year, 7-1 in conference play. Boston College, 7-5 on the year, 4-4 in conference play. This should be a fun game between two teams that I think have had pretty good years. A.J. Dillon is playing for Boston College, but I think that the Broncos are the better team. So give me the Broncos. They're laying only 1.5, and they're going to cover that easily. Minnesota at Georgia Tech is at 5:15 on ESPN. Minnesota is 6-6 on the year, 3-6 in conference play. Georgia Tech 7-5 on the year, 5-3 in conference play. This is the Quick Lane Bowl. The Gophers were unlikely to be in a bowl game the last week of the regular season and wound up winning as a big underdog to get this spot. The Yellow Jackets have had some good moments this season. Paul Johnson, this is his last game as their head coach, and I think they're going to bring him out a winner. So give me Georgia Tech. The number's pretty big at 6.5, but I like over 57. I think both teams can get the 30 in this spot. But I just think it's tricky that the back door is always open for Minnesota. TCU in California at 9 o'clock on ESPN. That's the Cheez-It Bowl. Cal 7-5 on the year, 4-5 in conference play. TCU 6-6 on the year, 4-5 in conference play. 9 o'clock ESPN. The Golden Bears have had a nice foundation under Justin Wilcox. Had some good moments this year. The Horned Frogs have been underachievers this season, but snuck in the spot with a few upset wins late in the year. I love the Bears in this spot. They're the better team. Their defense can make more stops than a bad Big 12 defense. That is the Horned Frogs defense. So give me Cal. They're laying 1.5, and they're covering that easily, although the under's an enticing play too. But I just don't think TCU's defense is very good, as Boston College just forced a punt by Boise State. So those are the bowl picks for today. Straight up, Boise, Georgia Tech, and Cal. I think Boise State and Cal both cover 1.5 point spreads. As Minnesota, Georgia Tech, I have over 57. And LeBron James, by the way, a clean MRI, so that is very good news for the Los Angeles Lakers. Last but not least, the best bet of the day, brought to you by DraftKings. Georgia Tech, Pacers, Grizzlies, and then 3 games for tomorrow because there's not much action today other than the Bulls and NBA. And I'm meaning the college Bulls. The Penguins, Bruins, and Lightning for tomorrow, plus 546 to win $10.85. And that's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow recapping all the bowl games, NBA, NHL returns tomorrow, college hoops returns tomorrow. I'm going to be doing my NBA redraft tomorrow for 2018. And I'll go over anything else that happens in the world of sports. Hope you guys have a great day, everybody.